In Southeast Asia, there are these pockets of mangrove forests stretching along the rivers of Thailand and Malaysia, completely filled with fireflies. Hundreds of thousands covering the branches of all the trees bowing over the flowing water. And for years and years, there was this myth that these specific fireflies, when they lit up at night, didn't light up like the ones that we're used to seeing here in Michigan in the summertime, random bits of lights here and there. But rather, as the sun set, they would start with random flashes, and then they would start to sink, until eventually they would all light up at the exact same time, blinking down miles of a river like synchronized holiday lights. It was considered a myth because no Westerner had ever witnessed it. They had just heard stories. Until 1965, when a married couple, John and Elizabeth Buck, traveled to Thailand and during the daytime collected a bunch of these fireflies from these specific trees, these branches, and brought them back to their hotel room. They closed their room door, turned off all the lights, released all the fireflies throughout their room, and then they laid on their backs in the dark and waited. And at first they saw nothing. I mean, not nothing, but they saw what fireflies do. They saw them lighting up and scattering throughout the room. They flew about and they lit up randomly. And eventually Elizabeth fell asleep. But John woke her a little bit later, and what she saw amazed her. There in the room was a coordinated light show of hundreds of perfectly orchestrated lights blinking in unison. The myth was true. But there is still some aspect of myth involved in this, because here we are 60 years later after the Bucks' trip to Thailand, and we still don't know how or why these fireflies light up in harmony. There are at least 10 theories, all of them cogently argued, but all of them also containing issues and unanswered questions. But the ultimate takeaway is that these lights are meant to blink together. They were made, or they were evolved, they are mandated to be together. Just a couple of days ago, Jews around the world counted down in our respective time zones to say goodbye to 2025 and to usher in a new secular year. Jews from all kinds of backgrounds, with all kinds of beliefs, all kinds of expressions of our Jewishness, and all of us thought to ourselves in one form or another, what will this year bring? And for some of us, that question is a question of hope. What blessings will the year ahead bring? What opportunities? And for others, that question is one of fear. What will happen to us? Will it get worse? Will there be more war, more fighting, more hate? But for the overwhelming majority of us, the question is really a complicated combination of both. We look to the year ahead with both hope and fear, and then we hold our breath, anxious to see what the year will be. And that anxiety makes sense, because so much of what will happen is out of our control. And that is very important for us to know. That is very important for you to know. That there will be so much this year that will be out of your control. Things that are good and things that are hard and challenging and even heartbreaking. But it is just as crucial for us to understand that we are not powerless in our response to an uncertain world. In fact, it is the very fact that we have agency in this world that separates us as Jews from so many other philosophical and theological belief systems. And the story that we read this morning as we conclude the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis, is perhaps the most beautiful example of that agency in all of Judaism. We see Yaakov, we see Yisrael, Jacob, the father of the Jewish people, on his deathbed, and he calls forward his son Yosef. He calls forward Joseph. And what we see is, in many ways, the continuation of a problematic view of inheritance and Jewish continuity. Jacob tells Joseph that he is going to bless Joseph's children, Ephraim and Manasseh. And when he does, for all intents and purposes, he adopts them, giving them the status of his children. No longer his grandchildren, his children, and thus rightful heirs to Yaakov's familial line. It cannot be understated how crucial this moment is, because after generations of pain and struggle and deep family wounds caused by favoritism and the election of one child over the other, bucking norms and long-established customs by choosing out of personal preference rather than birth order, Jacob takes this opportunity to do the exact same thing all over again. By blessing Ephraim and Manasseh, Jacob once again chooses Joseph. He chooses him as his favorite son. And it's not hard to imagine all the problems that this can cause. And as we said in Timely Torah this morning, that moment in that room, you can almost feel Joseph's heart sink in this moment, because he knows. He knows what happens. We've seen it before. But what's different this time is that witness to this blessing is someone who has felt firsthand the divisiveness and hurt that this favoritism can cause. Joseph is there to intervene. And he does. It's important. It's a very important aspect of this story that he tells his father, no, what you're doing is wrong. And even though he is rebuffed by Jacob, because Jacob says, no, I'm going to do this, this is the way that I am going to bless, he knows the path forward. Joseph knows the path forward depends on him. And so even with his children, blessed to inherit all of his father's line, to essentially be the leader of all of Israel, of Bnei Israel, of the Jewish people, Joseph does something incredible. He reports the blessing of his father to all of his brothers. His brothers who, let us remind ourselves, are currently bowing down to him as their master, just as Joseph's dreams foretold pages and pages and pages ago. And he tells them that their father has a blessing for them, for all of them. Not one over the other, but that there is promise to them and promise to them all a future that belongs to the Jewish people as family, united. For the first time in the Torah, the promise of Jewish continuity is given not to an individual, but to a family. And it is all because one dreamer dared to defy perceived inevitability and take matters into his own hands. Joseph's dream is to end the days of individual light and to finally allow the Jewish people, his family, to shine in unison, to share their fate not as competitors or antagonists, but as brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, an endless orchestra of synchronized light coming together as one. It's been 60 years since John and Elizabeth Buck showed the West what the locals in Thailand and Malaysia had known for centuries. 60 years later, we still have no idea why or how. But we know that it is an extraordinary sight. We know that it is beshert, that it is meant to be. And we also know that this natural wonder is capable of teaching us something important about us. That as the world turns, as a new year begins, and we all hold our breath for the uncertainty of life, that we have a choice. That we can take what the world gives us and blink at random, trying to navigate our individual paths to some kind of clarity. Or we can take it all. The good, the hard, the blessed, the challenging, and we can find one another, hold on to each other tight, and we can shine our lights together, creating a future that promises that no matter what happens, we're in it together. On this first Shabbat of 2026, let us look forward with hope and courage, and let us promise to one another that, come what may, our light will be united as one, that nothing will keep us apart, that our future, regardless of what it looks like, is one that we share together. Shabbat Shalom.